what's going on? This is Dr. Jeff C. May, and welcome to another episode of Doctor's Orders. For those of you who have been listening for a while on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever it may be, thank you for guys for the comments, the feedback, and here in today's show, this is going to be powerful because as I was sitting there and I was like, man, I really need to get in the studio. We need to knock some things out. I want to stay consistent with the podcast. Shout out to Stefan Studios. He's our photo guy. If you ever seen any of the work that he does through us, that's him. Check him out. But he was like, dude, you haven't dropped a podcast in a few weeks and I haven't got a notification. There's a new one. So I recorded last week. Thank you, Stefan, for the reminder. Recorded last week. We got back in here this week and I really didn't have a show planned until about 15 minutes ago. And what happened was really, really interesting, and the thoughts that it spurred on were even more interesting, but I want to apply it to you, to your health today, and I want to ask you a serious question, and the question is, have you become numb to the warning signs? Have you become numb and even blind? Like, it's even better. Are you blind to the danger that's right in front of you in the mirror? And here's how this started. Here's how I landed on today's episode. I feel it's divinely inspired because you know what? As this is going through, I was sitting in the office downstairs. I was working on some things. The team's rocking and rolling. Dr. Tyler's adjusting. Emmy's rocking the painadvantage.com with the soft wave. You know, Nurse Sarah's running around. There's vitamin IVs, and Tamara's holding down with the reset in the front. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing to see people come looking for solutions other than drugs and surgery. And while that was happening, I was sitting up front, and there's a siren, and I could hear the siren. Now, for those of you who don't know, we're a real small town, Jordan, Minnesota. There's usually not a whole lot of sirens. And I remember back when I was going to chiropractic school, I was in Bloomington, Minnesota. And so being in a heavier demographic or just population of people, plain and simple, there's more sirens, whether it's fire, police, or those things where there's more people, there's more things that happen. And I remember the first time moving to Bloomington, Minnesota. So this was, I'm going to date myself. Here we go. But this would have been September 2001. I moved there, and I came from way out western Nebraska in undergrad. And so then when I moved, we got there, and it was a big culture shift. It was a big thing, like the 494. I think my parents still say the 494. It's not 494. It's the 494, which is an interstate, but there's a lot of lanes on it. And so we adapted to a lot of things, and I got there. But I remember when I first started hearing sirens, I would look around, and I would say, what on earth is going on? Like, what's going on? I wasn't used to sirens. And I'd look around and I'd be like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. And I would almost feel anxious and start to wonder. And then over time, I realized that if you just wait a half hour, there's probably another siren, you know, and they may not been that frequent, but on days there were, I'm sure. And you would hear sirens more and more often. And you literally got to the point where the siren would go off and you wouldn't think twice. You wouldn't stop doing what you're doing. You wouldn't have any break of your normal thought pattern. It was just simply like people would almost have to remind you, hey, there's a siren. Do you hear that? And then you'd stop and you'd listen and you're like, oh man, I do hear that. I wonder what's going on. So it went from you'd hear a siren to it have a physical reaction, be anxious, be wondering, stop what you're doing, to get to the point where people had to remind you there was still a siren going. And so when I was down in the office just a short time ago, I was sitting there and as the siren went off, I realized I was like, oh man, I wonder what's going on. Like I was back to originally when I first even moved up to Minnesota, and I thought it was really interesting. I was like, man, I've gotten used to like not having sirens again. And so then I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, what's the purpose of the siren? Well, obviously something's happening that on the other end of that, you know, we were always like, growing up, you hear a siren, you say a quick prayer for that person. Put out some good thoughts and ask God, I hope everybody's safe, keep the firemen safe, keep the police safe, those type of things. And so I kind of had that reaction where I was like, oh, I hope everybody's okay. I hope there wasn't a car accident. And you start thinking through, because on the other end of that siren is trying to get someone very, very quickly to a dangerous situation, potentially for somebody. And they're trying to help. And so the sirens in themselves are a really good sign that, hey, help's on the way. You know, something bad is coming. Something bad maybe already happened, or it's imminent, you know, coming up. So me and my brain, here we go. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, man, have we become numb, you know, to the warning signs in our health? Think about this, because the sirens are obvious. They're loud. Everyone around them hears them. But if you're accustomed to them and you've gotten used to the warning signs, you really lose that edge of there's something wrong. You lose that edge of there's danger. You lose that edge of like, I could be in a bad predicament. And then I started thinking about our health. Yes, it's Monday. Yes, I'm in the office. Yes, we're helping a lot of people. We're a one-stop shop for natural health care. I get that. And yet we look around and I was like, hey, I wonder what the signs of that we're really losing touch with our health in terms of there's warning signs around us. So you may be waking up with pain in the morning. Like as soon as you take a first couple steps and your feet hurt so bad, and someone somewhere told you had plantar fasciitis, and now that's a warning sign. But every morning you're going through this and you kind of become numb to it. You know it's there, but you're like, whatever, kind of is what it is type of deal. Or you may step on the scale and you're like, oh gosh, that's like, 5-10 pounds heavier than I was last year. Well, it is what it is, it is what it is, but that's kind of the trend, in the back of our head we have, well, that's what people do. As you get older, you usually get bigger, all these things, but all of a sudden now it's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, even 100 pounds overweight. And you're looking at the doctor across from you and you didn't realize, you're like, well, how did I get here? And he's like, well, it happened little by little over time, a long period of time. But I hate to tell you this, but you're type 2 diabetic and you're now insulin dependent. And all of a sudden it's like, boom, that's like a big moment in your health. But yet there were sirens. There were warning signs along the way that were telling you, hey, you should really get this under control. But you became numb. You became numb to the warning signs. You literally were like me in chiropractic school, living where I lived, and a siren would go off and I wouldn't even notice it. Because I had gotten used to it. I got used to the sirens. I got used to the noises that told us there was something wrong. And in healthcare, I look around and we have so many things we've become accustomed to that we just call normal. We write it off as genetics. We write it off as, that's just how it is. Well, no, that's not freaking just how it is. Like you can't go, like say you die and you go to heaven and you realize that your life potential was another 10 years and you died 10 years earlier. And by the way, studies do show due to obesity, you'll die about 10 years sooner. Okay. Just how it is. Your body isn't going to last carrying that extra weight. It's not going to last functioning at that metabolic level. And then all of a sudden you get to heaven and you're sitting there and you're talking to God and God says, you know what? I had another good 10 years, planned for you. It's just, the fact is you're obese your whole life and now you lost 10 years. And you look at him, and you give God that excuse. You tell God, you're like, hey, it just is how it is. And you realize you could have had 10 more freaking years if you would have paid attention to the warning signs along the way. And it doesn't have to be just in obesity. I just know that's a massive problem. You take nearly 80% of the reason people die today in America, it's due to lifestyle choices. So it doesn't have to be obesity. It could be, anything else. It could be the fact that lifestyle choices, heart attacks, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, obesity being a comorbidity of so many things. Like it's tied into so many healthcare choices, but it comes down to what you're willing to do today. And I think a good question in this episode is saying, what am I numb to? What have I forgotten? What if I, let the world get me caught up and distracted in? And I truly think that's one of our biggest enemies against us is distraction, where distraction will pull us away. We get going and good in a routine. Maybe we're going to the gym. Maybe we found a good chiropractor. We started getting adjusted regularly. Got a vitamin IV, whatever it is. I started taking sugar out of my diet. And little by little, and then we get distracted. We get distracted because let's say, okay, Halloween's coming up. Well, big flipping deal. Like when was your life ever better because you decided to gorge out on sugar for Halloween? And then we hit Thanksgiving and then we hit Christmas and then your immune system's trashed and you wonder why, I guess it just is how it is. No, it's not is how it is. I think it's the dumbest thing ever. And when we look at it, we have to come at it as an angle of compassion. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it's really, really hard. As a doctor, as a healthcare provider, as whatever you want to call me Dr. Freak, but I don't even care. Whatever it is, the angle of compassion is sometimes super, super difficult, especially when someone wants to walk in. And I get this. There's a whole nother discussion around this, but they walk in and they say, hey, is my insurance going to cover this? Is my insurance going to cover this? Chances are not. You know why? Because what we do here works. And unfortunately, you want to talk a big machine, you talk insurance. It's not even my game. I'm hoping I'll get this guy on in a future episode here soon. His name's John Butler. He wrote Health Insurance Sucks. It's a great book, but you want to dive into something where You're like, holy crap, I didn't even realize. And now you're going in and you're saying this magic little card of my insurance is responsible for making me healthy. And if this provider isn't covered, or if it doesn't cover it, then I can't do it. Now, I understand you may have to make financial arrangements. Guess what? It's priorities. Pull your big girl pants up, pull your big boy pants up, and realize that if your health is really important, you pay attention to what you pay for. And if you value it, you're going to pay for it. If you value it, you're going to pay for it. Like my kids are, like I got 2 kids in braces right now. It is not cheap, but I value the fact that their smile and their teeth are important for their health and the rest of their life. And so we pay for it. We figure it out. That may mean skip a vacation. Big deal. It may mean put a few more hours into work. Okay, we'll figure it out. Let's be an adult and let's figure this thing out, because I know at the end of the day, none of us get out of this thing alive. We are all going to die. And no matter how many different scenarios that happens for people, it is so evident in America today that it's by lifestyle choices. And that to me is so sad, to know that a majority of people die because of the choices that they made. And sometimes when I get up here and I put on the headphones and the microphone and I say, well, you know what, maybe today this is going to reach somebody and they'll make different choices. And that's the best we can hope for a lot of times, because I want to come at it in a compassionate way as a healthcare provider, but I also have to drop the hammer and drop a hard line. Because you don't realize that some people, they can't have a gray area. Like if you tell them they have a meal plan and they're like, do I get a cheat day? And you're like, yeah, a cheat day is fine. Some people can't have a cheat day. Some people can figure it out. But you need to know yourself and you need to figure it out. And so that's why I want to leave you with this question today. I want to hit you hard with the question is, what have you become numb to? What have you become blind to in your life? What warning sign? Could be your changing your sleep. Could be subtle. It may be obvious. It may be subtle for some of you. But what warning sign have you become blind to? And if nothing changes, if you continue to ignore that warning sign, that siren in your life and around your healthcare, what's going to happen? And I want you to play it out. Are you going to become type 2 diabetic? Are you going to develop cancer? Could you develop more serious diseases, gut health, the neurology of your body? Are you able to function in a way where you can't, run a mile, or the thought of running a mile is disastrous, no matter what time it is? Like, you should be able to have these core things in order to move forward. And if you need help with that, just let us know. We're here for you. Comment, like, share, whatever it is. Like, never before in my life have I become more, open myself up to help reach people. And we're pushing harder than ever before. I'm coming up on my 15th year anniversary in this game. And I will tell you, it is something where I'm like, man, I just feel like we're just getting started. And I want to encourage you out there. You can make changes. You can do these things for your health, but only you can do it. The person in the mirror is ultimately the most responsible. And I can't help those who don't want to help themselves. I did a live video last night and I said, God's not going to bless the work that you're unwilling to do. Okay, but he will bless the work that you do. So I want to encourage you guys, answer that question. What have you become blind to? What warning sign have I become blind to in my life? And if I don't change it, what will be the result? You guys, those are your doctor's orders. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.